guys? This is Cole South, and today I want to talk about developing a pre-flop strategy for 6-max PLO. The hands you select pre-flop really dictate your overall game plan. If you start with weak hands, you're going to have weak ranges post-flop, and pre-flop is really the foundation of your PLO game. Having a well-thought-out pre-flop game plan helps you stay consistent at the tables. You'll find it's not uncommon to see tight PLO players just randomly open King 5-4-2 double suited under the gun, and you're just left wondering how the heck they fit that hand into their 12% under the gun range. Poker is definitely headed in a direction where precision is becoming more and more important, and really thinking long and hard about your pre-flop strategy is going to help you make consistent, precise decisions at the tables. By identifying pre-flop leaks, you'll be well on the way to exploiting other players who then present those leaks. So for example, you determine that opening 85% of hands from early position is probably a leak, and then you see someone implementing that strategy. It's only a couple of small steps before you figured out how to effectively exploit that tendency. Two important tools I use to work on my pre-flop strategies are the Pro Poker Tools rankings and Hold'em Manager's RFI statistic. You can use the PPT rankings to see how hands do hot and cold and just check general equities, and RFI is the stat we'll use to determine how aggressively players are opening pots. It stands for raise first in. So you might be thinking, okay, why is this so difficult? We're just going to play sweet hands and shift big pots. Well, if you Google image search PLO pre-flop hands, literally this picture of this monkey is the first thing that comes up. You're going to see a lot of monkeying around in PLO pre-flop spots because a well-defined strategy is tough to put together. In No Limit Hold'em, there are only 1,326 hand combinations, so developing a discrete starting hand strategy where, say, we raise Queen 10 offsuit but fold Queen 9 offsuit when we're on the cutoff is easy enough to do. And that's why in every beginner's No Limit Hold'em book you'll see starting hand charts that are designed to start players off with strong hands and keep them out of difficult post-flop situations. PLO, on the other hand, has over 270,000 starting hand combinations, and that makes this starting hand chart approach a lot less feasible. Another important factor in PLO is playability versus hot and cold equity ranking. In No Limit Hold'em, you're basically never going to prefer to have 10-9 suited over pocket queens pre-flop. In PLO, however, a hand like Jack 10-9-8 double suited, which is in the 17th percentile versus a random hand, is almost always going to be preferable to King 7-4 rainbow, which is all the way up in the top 9th percentile versus a random hand. The absolute number one thing I want to talk about when it comes to developing a pre-flop strategy is positional awareness. Let's do a quick recap of why having position is so important in PLO. PLO is a game where the nuts are out relatively frequently, so it's hard to value bet non-nut hands when your opponent can have the nuts and he hasn't acted yet. When you're in position, you're able to value bet much more freely with the added information that your opponent's checked. There's so many times in PLO where you just have a jack-high flush, and if you're out of position, you really can't value bet. It's almost a bluff catcher. On the other hand, if you're in position and your opponent's checked, you frequently have a very profitable value bet. It's so rare for someone just to donk bet into you on all three streets, so having position pretty much lets you decide how many bets are going to go into the pot post-flop. When you have weak hands that want to see showdown, you can set the price of seeing the river to 1 or possibly 0 bets, depending on if your opponent leads into you on the turn. On the other hand, when your opponent's range is weak given the board, you can set an expensive price to show their hand down, and there's not much they can do about it. In general, having position is awesome because it allows you to decide who gets free cards and then helps you make more informed decisions after the flop. When I say we want to incorporate positional awareness into our pre-flop strategy, what I mean is that we want to think about position in all of our pre-flop decisions. We're going to have ranges that change based on our position at the table. Our overall plan is going to be to play tight up front and then loosen up as we get closer to the button. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of real-life example tables that should help illustrate this concept. So here I've got a table I played recently that really hammers home the point of positional awareness. I've got a 25-50 6-max PLO game where there was a recreational player playing, but he's since busted, And at this point, it's just 6 regs battling. So everybody at this table at this point plays poker for a living and has a decent idea of what they're doing, but they're either sitting because they think they have an edge, or are stuck and just want to gamble, or for whatever reason. And it's interesting the variety of pre-flop strategies we're going to find at this table. I kind of want to talk about what I think works and what doesn't work that each player is doing. So if we first look at my strategy so far, it's only been 160 hands at this table, but I V-pipped 35%, I've raised 28% of hands, and I've 3-bet 21% of hands. And certainly, as those numbers will converge, my 3-bet percentage, for example, will decrease. But this should give us a good idea of my steal by position and the positional awareness that goes into that pre-flop strategy. So RFI is the stat that I'm most interested in when I'm trying to dissect how aggressively players are opening pots. It's a raised first in, and it's a very important stat to have in your heads-up display if you're using Poker Tracker or Holding Manager or whatever. So from early position so far, I've been raising 18% of pots. Then from middle position, raising 32%, 41% on the cutoff, and then really opening up on the button to 56%. And these certainly are not hard and set stats that I have. I raise this hand, I don't raise this hand. It's somewhat table dependent. But the general gist of it is that I'm opening up as I hit the button. I'm playing pretty snug in early position. I think in particular that early position number is important when you're at a table full of regs. It's the type of thing where if the other players at the table don't have respect for your early position opens and they think you're opening 40 or 45% from early position, they're just going to pound on you so hard from the button and cut off when they're 3-betting you to where everything's going to be going against you in those pots if you're playing out of position in a big pot without the initiative, and if you're opening that wide with the worst hand. And you're really just going to get bled dry, particularly in non-showdown pots where you open ace-jack 10-6 with one suit to the 10, and then just have to, if you're calling the 3-bet and then check folding a ton of flops, you're really going to be bleeding chips there. So I like to stay pretty snug from early position in tough games, and that allows me to have I've raised 28% of hands, and I've 3-bet 21% of hands. And certainly, as those numbers will converge, my 3-bet percentage, for example, will decrease. But this should give us a good idea of my steal by position and the positional awareness that goes into that pre-flop strategy. So RFI is the stat that I'm most interested in when I'm trying to dissect how aggressively players are opening pots. It's a raised first in, and it's a very important stat to have in your heads-up display if you're using Poker Tracker or Holding Manager or whatever. So from early position so far, I've been raising 18% of pots. Then from middle position, raising 32%, 41% on the cutoff, and then really opening up on the button to 56%. And these certainly are not hard and set stats that I have. I raise this hand, I don't raise this hand. It's somewhat table dependent. But the general gist of it is that I'm opening up as I hit the button. I'm playing pretty snug in early position. I think in particular that early position number is important when you're at a table full of regs. It's the type of thing where if the other players at the table don't have respect for your early position opens and they think you're opening 40 or 45% from early position, they're just going to pound on you so hard from the button and cut off when they're 3-betting you to where everything's going to be going against you in those pots if you're playing out of position in a big pot without the initiative, and if you're opening that wide with the worst hand. And you're really just going to get bled dry, particularly in non-showdown pots where you open ace-jack 10-6 with one suit to the 10, and then just have to, if you're calling the 3-bet and then check folding a ton of flops, you're really going to be bleeding chips there. So I like to stay pretty snug from early position in tough games. And that allows me to have strong ranges when I'm playing pots out of position, and to have a bigger portion of my range as hands that I can 4-bet. So if I've got a tight early position range, aces make up more of that range. Or if I'm playing a guy that's, say, mindlessly 3-betting 25% on the button, regardless of the action before, I can open up that 4-betting range to say aces, ace-king, king, and double-suited kings for value, maybe even a few bluffs in there. And that's going to make up enough of my early position range that I'm not going to be playing as many pots without the initiative out of position. So we can compare that general strategy to a couple of the other players at the table. We first take the player to my immediate left. He's a very good player who I've played a ton of hands with on a variety of sites, and I do really respect his game. He's a thinking player who's certainly put a lot of work into his pre-flop strategy. Overall, he's V-pipping 35% of hands, raising 21%, and 3-betting 8% of hands. I'd say in general for regs in these games, that's a little bit on the looser side, but not insanely aggressive or anything, and certainly a strategy that could be part of an overall winning game plan. And for this guy, I think it definitely is. We can try to kind of see how positionally aware this player is by looking at his RFI by position. So if we see that overall he's raised 26% of hands from early position, still playing pretty tight from middle position, 29% RFI. Again in the cutoff, still pretty snug, 32%. He's not opening up too much until he hits the button, and then he's all the way up in the 60s, opening 60% of pots, really maximizing that positional advantage. This is a player, again, whose game I really respect, and I think this is a positionally aware strategy that's definitely working out for him. If we take a look for maybe the player right across from him, he's playing a significantly tighter strategy, V-pipping 25% of hands, PFRing 18%, and 3-betting 6%. So a lot more snug, but definitely a thinking, strong player who makes it work for him. If we look at his positional awareness, he's playing extremely tight from early position and middle position. Just 11% of hands under the gun and 14% from the hijack. And those numbers really allow him to stick in a ton of 4-bets when his early position raises, get 3-bet. And it just, it makes it to where when he raises from early position and you're looking at some pretty double-suited rundown on the button that you might 3-bet against a lot of guys, you just can't do it against him because he's going to have aces too often or, another hand that he can 4-bet.
This is Lucky Chewy for Ivy League. I'm going to be making a bit of a different video today, sort of trying to follow along in the footsteps of Zaza, as his video got excellent reviews and everybody seemed to appreciate the content. My last videos have been sort of hand history review based, and I personally never thought that hand history review was one of my best attributes as a video maker, because it sort of takes in isolation a hand that there's a lot of build up to, and without that build up it's a bit difficult sometimes to see why a certain play might happen or why it makes sense out of context. So I'm going to attempt here to talk about the various things that lead up to I guess in a session various considerations and aspects of the game that allow the dynamic to develop as it does. So typically when I sit down, as I have a bit of a known image within the poker world, it's going to be different for me than it is for some of you, in that most people are going to have some kind of preconception about me, and that's tricky sometimes because although I can recognize that a preconception is held by my opponents, I can't always tell what that preconception necessarily is. Sometimes it becomes fairly obvious that, based on just a very subtle comment, or maybe just even like I raise and then they fold their blind and give like a big sigh, and it kind of lets me know that this person thinks like, alright, here's this younger, aggressive, internet-bred sort of player who's going to be like overly aggressive, and for the most part that's not really the case. Like, obviously, sometimes I'm going to make some crazy plays, as we all are, when the time's right, but it's definitely clear to me sometimes that my opponents think I'm much more aggressive than I am. And at other times, against more aggressive opponents, they might think that I'm tighter than I am based on me folding for a couple of orbits. Especially in live poker, it's very easy to become deluded based on the recent occurrences, in orbit or two, even an hour or two, really. You're just not getting that many hands. It's very easy to go card dead, or just not have any spots. And people can definitely get the wrong idea, which, so long as you are aware of the idea that's held or being conveyed, that really allows you to get a better sense of how the dynamic is being shaped. Because personally, when I sit down, I don't like to have preconceptions. Naturally, though, and I'm going to reference live poker a bit, as it's more of what I've been playing lately, in Vegas and whatnot. You do sometimes have to take into consideration what is happening at the table, and it is difficult to not make assumptions when sometimes an older guy is he's playing somewhat tight, and without trying to contradict what I'm saying, over a couple of orbits you do gain a sense of I guess what I'm trying to say is your awareness allows you, if cultivated properly, to see how somebody might just approach the game of poker itself. And a lot of times, and I even realize this in myself, and I would consider it a leak to some degree, that very much like our personalities, we have things about our poker games that we like to stick to. And it's oftentimes those things that they might not even be leaks, but when something within one's game is not frequently being swayed from, if you can realize that, it definitely gives you a leg up, because if somebody has like a fallback play, like say somebody just always likes to check raise on ace-high boards, it's not something that really happens that much anymore, but, or paired boards maybe is a better example. It gives you a leg up knowing that somebody's bluff frequency is going to be very high when the board comes like 8-8-4, for example. So yeah, I definitely like to try to figure those things out about people, and it is a very fine line, and it's quite tricky, because you don't want to just see a certain play and assume that that is something this person always does. But if something is occurring with a high enough frequency over the course of a small period of time, sometimes you just kind of can tell this is, like I said, a fallback play, like a comfortable spot that somebody enjoys being in. Check raising paired boards against some players is going to be quite profitable if they don't continue without, X percent of their range. So yeah, that's off the bat something I'm trying to look for in my opponents.
At the 2003 World Series of Poker, an and amateur Chris Moneymaker turned $40 into $2.5 million. Since then, No Limit Texas Hold'em has thrived. Every year, prestigious poker events earn several new millionaires all across the globe. This action is not just isolated to casinos, though. Online poker is surging, and is arguably even more popular than playing live. There are tens of thousands of players competing on poker sites at any one time, making the opportunities abundant. And with more and more players entering the game, it's no surprise that it's making professionals out of so many. In fact, online poker completely revolutionised the game, inspiring a new generation of internet players who earn sizable incomes off of poker.
I first started playing when I was 15. I walked over to the computer and my dad was playing Play Money and he taught me the rules. He had a poker book in the bathroom and I read it. It was Phil Helmer's Play Poker Like the Pros, I think, and I digested it and just kind of, that was the beginning.
Max is just one of many who have been drawn to the game of Hold'em. And considering how quick and easy it is to start playing online, it's no real surprise that it's become so popular. The opportunity to play from the comfort of your own home, all at just the click of a few buttons, has categorically increased their market.
As a tournament player, if I travel to play most average tournaments in a casino, the tournament may be a £50 or £100 tournament. I have to spend X amount of money travelling, I have to spend X amount of money on food and drink while I'm there. The return on investment, ROI, isn't as high as it's going to be over me playing a daily spread of say 50 tournaments online, so generally speaking, in terms of because it's my profession, I have to do what makes me the most money.
I play multi-table tournaments online, so these are tournaments that with 100 people or 1,000 people online, and then they can last any time between 3 to 4 hours and 12 hours for the biggest tournaments. So you tend to register multiple of these tournaments throughout the day. Let's say 50, 60 a day, and play for many hours.
It's pretty clear that without the online games, boom poker's experiencing will be tiny in comparison. Internet poker has enabled players to significantly increase their volume. You have to play often, but if only a very small amount as successful. In the end, if someone's going to play more tournaments, they're going to learn more, and they're probably going to win more because they'll have more ability. Ultimately, volume appears essential to help turn an internet player professional. As Amari says, it's the best way to counter variance. The more you play, the more likely you'll see people play rewarded. Regarding such, as it's a card game, it's not so uncommon for players to go on a 3-day losing run, for instance. This is a spread online of 150 tournaments. For the sake of argument, if these online professionals are making a living playing live, considering that they can only play one a day, the same downswing might last half a year. Not an easy way to make a living. It also means that they'll need a lot of money in their account to avoid going broke. Bankroll management is essential for any professional poker player.
If you have $1,000 to your name, don't play a $500 tournament. It's kind of changed over the years. It used to be that you would have a buy-in if you played tournaments of about 100 of your bankroll. But it's kind of got smaller since then because people have realised the variance is so much bigger than what we thought it was back then.
In my role, I probably have about 800 average buy-ins, maybe 1,000, something like that. It's between 700 and 1,000 average buy-ins, I'd say. But in terms of the top buy-in, on a day-to-day basis, I probably exercise this. In fact, probably about 300 buy-ins. The biggest tournament I play, say if it was 100, would be 30,000, for example.
This mentality is one of the many things that may differentiate professionals from amateurs. An amateur may casually deposit $100 into their poker account, play a $30 tournament in which they less than cash money. However, if under Max's approach they only into this tournament if they had at least $5,000 to put aside for poker, then they might not be so keen.
Alright.
For professionals, in order to compensate for losing runs, this discipline is essential. Bankroll management enables them to deal with variance and the possibility of losing a lot before striking gold. With so much money put aside for poker though, how do they keep away from higher stakes knowing they might lose more reward?
That's the thing when I started out, just to save money because I wanted to have this financial security, and then after that, I grew my bankroll. It was big enough, I kept it at the same level, just cash out the profit and save it.
mostly just stick to the same games regardless of when
Well, there's always the unknown with higher buying tournaments. Like, you don't know what the quality of play is going to be like until you enter that tournament. So I maintain a better safe than sorry mentality when it comes to it.
when I'm playing 5 times a week, then you start to recognize who are the good regular players, who are the which recommend and you can online you can make notes from them and kind of listen. So like if I open one of the higher buying tournaments on a day and I see there's maybe 3 girls, then maybe I'll play it. But then the next day is the day where it's softer, fewer and more recreational, regular players. You know, if I open it, some days you can open it and the lobby is just full of all the colours which should be good players. You know, that day you might play this every other day of the week. So that's the best way to maintain discipline, in my opinion. Is if it doesn't make me money, well, I don't expect to make money from it. I won't play it.
If a player does decide to take a shot at a higher bind than they're used to, these binds have attracted a field of strong players. It's also not so uncommon to see errors creep into their game.